Hey dudes and dudettes, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. In today's video, I was super inspired by a video and card that Natasha Foote created. She took some of my ink pads and she used them to do some ink blending and then watercolored over top of it for a cool monotone effect. I absolutely love how it looked and I'll link that down below in case you guys want to watch it after this video. So I created my kind of own take and spin on this fun card for a beautiful rainbow ink blended and watercolored card. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so I'm starting off with a piece of stark white cardstock here and using a rainbow assortment of my Simon Hurley Create inks to ink blend around in a circle. Now I wanted to show this first card even though it didn't end up being the final result because I ended up ink blending a little bit too much ink on the surface and it got too dark and saturated. But I still wanted to share it just to show how dark and vibrant and saturated you can get these inks to be. And also I wanted to kind of compare them and really show you how light you needed to actually blend in order to make this technique work in the end. So I'm just going around the cardstock here and doing my ink blending in a circle. I used Bee Sting, Prom Queen, Guppy, Slippery and Wet, Overzealous, Tropical Tango, Clear Skies, Crown Me, and Triple Berry for this rainbow ink blend. And I used the same colors for the other card, but you'll see in just a little bit how different of results you can get with the ink just by how heavy-handed or light-handed you go. So then I'm finishing off the ink blending with my last color here, and then I'm going to go in and do a little bit of stamping. And I'll show you more in depth on this process later in the video. I just wanted to share that you can actually make this card look good in the end just by stamping down and keeping it just like this. So I actually like how this one turned out. You'll definitely be able to see that it's a lot darker than how I'm going to actually blend the card. So once I did that, here is a look at me trying to watercolor on top of it, and since the background was already really dark, it didn't give me the kind of contrast that I wanted with the colors painted on top. So I decided to restart. Paper has two sides, you can always flip it over and retry. So here, I'm going in with the exact same colors. This is why I thought it was so important to show you guys that just by the amount of pressure you add, you can literally make any of these colors to be pastel colors. So I'm going in and doing my ink blending around the circle, and you can see I barely pick up any ink, but even if I am picking up ink, I'm just really lightly going onto the surface. If you need to, you can always switch over to blending brushes as well, because like we talked about in past videos, those give a lot of a lighter coverage there. So if you struggle with being a little bit too heavy-handed, that might help you with this technique. Another thing you could do is if your blending tools are already really saturated with ink, you can always go in without even applying more ink from your ink pad and just go directly onto the surface. That can give you a really light and subtle pastel wash of color, especially if you're super heavy-handed. That can be another good way to get really a lot of control on your card. So I'm just finishing up with the purples here, and you can see this purple, Crown Me, is supposed to be a lot darker and more vibrant of a color, but just by lifting up on the pressure a little bit, you can make any of these pastel. So then I'm going to compare them side by side, and you can really see compared to that beginning background on the left that we created, that is so much more darker and saturated than the one that we created on the right here. They both look great, but pressure really changes the outcome. Next, I'm going to grab the Swirly Ferns background stamp, and this one is a peel apart background. So I've peeled apart all the pieces that I want to use, and I'm going to be stamping my own background with them. I love with peel apart background stamps that you can take them apart and use the images to create whatever you want with it. It's almost like getting a whole other stamp set in your background. So for the stamping, I'm just taking all the pieces and stamping them in jet black archival ink all around the background in a circle, but I want to leave a large enough space in the center for my sentiment. So this is similar to how the background stamp was laid out, but it didn't have enough room to put my sentiment in, so I love that I'm able to peel apart and create my own design. And I love that you can kind of put these on the side of the card too if you want to, and really create your own look to it and not have it look like everybody else's. So once I'm finished stamping all the larger branches down, then I'm going to go in, and I love that we included this little tiny piece in, because you can go into some of the littler spots that you might have missed and add that little fern into some of those to fill in the rest of the background. Now I'm stamping this in jet black archival ink, but if you want to, you can totally go in and heat emboss it in white or gold, and that would give you a cool effect as well. Now next I'm going to be creating a palette with my Simon Hurley Create inks. I'm grabbing all of the exact same colors and smooshing them onto my craft sheet so I can start my watercoloring. Now for this watercoloring, I'm going into each color with my paintbrush and less water than I would usually use for this. Usually I'd go in and, water it down, but the more you water down the colors, the less vibrant and saturated they are. So you want to try to keep them as vibrant as possible by using less water than you usually would when you watercolor. And then I'm going to go on top of the color that I blended down with. So if I'm in the area that I blended the Prom Queen ink, I'm going to go into the Prom Queen ink and watercolor right on top of that with the same color. Now it's going to end up being darker because we did the blending a lot lighter handed, and that was more of a pastel look at the colors. That's why at the beginning, when I blended in that background that was really vibrant and saturated, it just didn't work for this technique, even though I loved the outcome and look of it. So you can really see, especially with that green and the reds, that it just gives a really cool, vibrant, monotone, saturated color on top of it. And of course, you could do this with the watercolor and blending like we're doing today, but you can also do a lighter effect of blending and then go over top with a stencil and do a darker blending over top to get the same kind of tone-on-tone look, which I think is so stunning in the end. I'm just finishing up my background watercolor here, and I'm so glad that I saw Natasha's video so I can kind of break out my inks and try this in my own style. So once that's all done, I love how that kind of darker tone-on-tone looks with the watercolor. And then I'm going to spray down my excess ink that I left on my craft sheet here and start dipping some stark white cardstock into it. This is going to give me a really cool kind of colorful watercolor background, and then I'm going to heat set that to dry in between my layers. Then, once it's dry, I can go back into that ink and add a little bit more texture onto it. I dry it in between layers just so that it's nice and dry and won't blend all together, so it creates some more texture. Now here's another cool tone-on-tone look. I went in over top with a stencil and am blending the color on top that was underneath. So if I see purple, I'm going to blend some of the purple on. If I see orange, I'll blend some of my orange color on top of there, and so on and so forth. So this definitely works with ink blending as well, like I was talking about earlier. You can get some really cool effects with it. And I really barely went back into my ink pads. I just used what was ever left over on my tool, and you get that cool look on top of it. Kind of a pastel pattern on top, and then you get all the cool watercolor and texture that's underneath. So there's just kind of a cool bonus technique that you can totally try. So to finish off my card, I'm going in with the encouraging words stamp set, and I'm going to pull a sentiment for this. I just love the big encouraging fonts and how it finishes off a card so nicely. A tip that I have is to take that out of its packaging and test out all the different sentiments just right on the acrylic without even pulling them off. I found that the Follow Your Dreams sentiment worked best for me, so I'm inking that up with some embossing ink, stamping that down onto some vellum, and then heat embossing it with a white heat embossing powder, which is going to stand out really nicely on our card. Now to emboss on vellum, you want to get your heat tool good and hot before you bring it to the surface. Keep it constantly moving, and if it gets a little bit too hot, bring your tool away and then pull it back to there. You just don't want to keep the tool in one place for too long to avoid warping. Then to adhere this down, you could either put an adhesive all along the back so that it covers the whole thing and you won't be able to see it, or I like to put some liquid adhesive and hide it underneath. And then I adhered all that together, and there's the finished card. I just love it, was so inspired by Natasha, and love this kind of rainbow tone-on-tone look. I want to give a quick shout out to today's amazing sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives and people like us. They have thousands of classes on their website in topics like animation, graphic design, crafts, music, and then other topics like freelancing and entrepreneurship, which I think is so cool that there's such a wide variety of classes. There's definitely going to be something for everybody. Now for me, I've been taking a class all about illustration on the iPad in an app called Procreate. For me, I design all of my stamps and illustrations, and so it's really important to know different programs like Procreate inside and out. And it's been really cool to see my improvement over time after taking a few classes. If you want to join Skillshare, it's less than $10 a month with an annual membership. Alright guys, it's future me here after the whole video is edited, but I wanted to pop back in and let you guys know that the first 1,000 people that click the link down below in the description box will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership, which is so awesome. So click that down below to check it out. Alright guys, I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. below so you never miss another card making and crafting video just like this one from me. I also have a phone number which I'll leave on the screen right now so you guys can text me for all my sales, deals, new video notifications, and also to chat one-on-one with me. I've had tons of fun talking to you guys in there and answering any questions that you have. Alright, I'll see you all very, very soon for another card making and crafting video. Have a great day. Bye!